Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this ordinary meeting of Council on the 13th of October. If I just remind you, turn off your mobile phones if you've got them. Acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Thorowal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders, both past, present and emerging. I also would like to extend my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, either present here today or watching the recording. A council prayer. Let us meet in this council chamber in a spirit of fellowship and goodwill to represent all members of the community in its cultural and religious diversity, to be honest and objective in all our deliberations, to respect the view of residents, the rights of all to express their opinions without fear or favour, and to make decisions for the common good of the community. Obviously, there's no apologies. General Manager, declarations of interest. Thank you. The minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 8 September. I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on Wednesday, 8 September, be adopted as a true record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. As usual, I have an interim administrator's minute. On 10 September, the Minister for Local Government gazetted an order postponing the next ordinary elections due on 4 December 2021 until September 2022 for the reason that the Council is the subject of a public inquiry. I table a copy of the order. Commissioner Ross Glover has now released the Wingecarribee Shire Council Public Inquiry Information Paper, and elsewhere on this agenda is a General Manager's report in relation to the matter. It's important to note that the inquiry is independent of Council, and residents, ratepayers and staff may be assured of the Council's total cooperation. Tulip Time is Council's signature event, and all who are responsible, especially those involved in planting 120,000 bulbs, I say well done. The virtual Tulip Time launched on 30 September at least allows people from outside the LGA to enjoy the visual spectacle this year, but it is very disappointing that our visitor economy has not been able to take advantage of the event for the past 2 years. From meeting many residents, particularly in Corbett Garden, they have enjoyed being able to leisurely take in the garden's splendour without the clutter of stores. Some residents have questioned whether the rental of same represents good value, and no doubt in debriefing this year's event, staff will take this into account. On Monday, 20 September, I joined the member for Wallandilly, Nathaniel Smith, the Mayor of Wallandilly Shire Council, and the Transport Heritage New South Wales Chairman, when Mr Smith announced additional funding of $9.1 million to reopen the loop line from Buxton to Collovale. This is an exciting announcement for the Northern Villages, and the work of Mr Smith in securing total funding of $14.6 million is acknowledged. Many tourists will be brought into the Shire to enjoy the ride on the golden age of steam trains, and no doubt many will simply just want to experience trains in the Big Cut just north of Hilltop. The location of what was the deepest railway cutting on the Northern Hemisphere, in the Southern Hemisphere, I should say, is not well kept and, in my view, dangerous. In addition, there is no landscaping around the nearby sculpture, Human Endeavour, which commemorates the achievements of workers, including the 3 who tragically lost their lives in an explosion, in creating the Big Hill cutting. The site will no doubt have some heritage sensitivities, but I've asked the General Manager to commence design and costing work on a viewing platform, landscaping and parking, and to seek grant funding from government to enhance the project with a view to it being in place before work on the loop line is completed. That's estimated to be mid-2023. Following the decision to no longer proceed with the Station Street improvements and to modify the works, I reported I'll start again. Following the decision to no longer proceed with Station Street improvements and to modify the works, I reported to the June 2021 meeting that approximately $4.1 million would be available as a result of the initial $7.5 million grant from the government. Approaches were made to the members for Goulburn and Wallandilly, seeking their support to have the balance reallocated, and I outlined agreed priorities. Representations were made to the former Deputy Premier and Minister for Regional New South Wales, advising of the lack of community support and significant shortfall in funding, $17.7 million, the Station Street project, and requesting a reallocation of funds. A reply has now been received advising that Restart New South Wales funds are awarded to specific projects following a vigorous independent assessment process by Infrastructure New South Wales, including a requirement for the project that it must achieve a benefit to cost ratio of greater than 1. Restart New South Wales funds are offered to the approved project only, and unfortunately, Council has been advised that it is not able to be reallocated to the other nominated projects. In addition, Council staff have confirmed that while the proposed works in Station Street will address a number of community concerns and issues, they do not pass the benefit to cost test. That's the bad news. But the good news is that the former Deputy Premier encouraged Council to work with his department to discuss potential funding options for the nominated projects, and in this regard, productive meetings have already been held. Ensuring a suitable space for an emergency operations centre is a priority, and an area at the civic. Ensuring a suitable space for an emergency operations centre is a priority, and an area at the Civic Centre was proposed by the former Leocon. This was seen as potentially not being achievable. However, in discussions and work to date, the General Manager has advised that there is a space which is able to be considered. I have met with senior emergency management staff, and a report to the November meeting will present options for how this could be achieved for the short to medium term. The full response to the Owens report will be presented to Council in December. However, I have determined that it is critical to progress this item and to seek state government funding. The location of a water tank near the RFS shed in Balmoral is still causing some community concern, and following a recent meeting with the regional office of RFS, it has been agreed that Council will further investigate the concerns expressed, and exploratory bores will be sunk to provide more certainty. That's in relation to the provision of water. I will be conducting further community meetings across villages and towns from now until December. These meetings will be open forum and will provide an opportunity for the community to directly ask questions and raise matters of concern. The details for meetings, including tickets, are now available on Council's website. It is important that Council continues its engagement with the community to regain its trust and to restore the community and to ensure the community's involvement in Council decision-making processes, particularly during this time of administration. Arrangements are also being made for me to visit all community volunteer-based RFS and SES groups before Christmas, hopefully on their training nights. The General Manager has also advised that staff are working to ensure that our Australia Day celebrations are more inclusive, and some exciting ideas will be presented to the November meeting. Residents would be aware that the state government has given notice of its intention to sell Berrima Jail, as it's no longer being used. Discussions have been held with the Berrima Residents Association, Property and Development New South Wales, and our local member for the area, Wendy Tuckerman MP. The discussions have been very constructive, and Council is seeking to work with all parties to develop a community-led strategic vision for the site stroke precinct to help frame the expressions of interest process. It is hoped that this collaborative approach will identify key planning priorities that will help to shape the future use of this heritage icon, provide certainty to proponents, build confidence in the community, and deliver a good outcome for all. And finally, as this is the last meeting that Miss Marissa Rackham-Molera and Mr. Malcolm Ryan will attend, although they won't be lost to the organisation completely. Personally, and on behalf of the Shire community, a big thank you to you both. I know that COVID restrictions have kept you from your families, and we appreciate your efforts throughout your time here. It's also opportune to welcome our new directors, Carmel Foster, Jeff King, and Karen Targa. I'm confident that together with the General Manager, they will work to the benefit of the Wingecarribee Shire, and that they are well aware of the task ahead and the opportunities available in such a wonderful region that has engaged residents and an enthusiastic, dedicated and professional staff. They're online, the directors, so welcome. And to Marissa and Malcolm, once again, thank you. I would move that this minute be received and noted and declare that carried. We now move to items listed on the business paper.
Continuing one, when is it?
Yeah, it's a while.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Scandrett, can I suggest you turn your phone off? I don't know what happened there then. Well, my apologies. We now move to the items listed on the business paper. General Manager, the public inquiry into the council, your report. Are you doing introduction or just move to it? Thank you. In relation to the report of the General Manager 8.1 on page 3 of the business paper, I thank you for the report, but I've got a different recommendation in relation to that. I would move that one, it be noted that the interim administrator has formally advised the commissioner that he will be making a submission to the public inquiry. 2, it be noted that the general manager intends to make a submission to the public inquiry, and as it will contain confidential staffing and operational matters, she will be requesting that those matters not be made public. 3, having regard to 1 and 2 above, Council advised the Commissioner that it does not intend to make a written submission to the public inquiry or to seek leave to appear and participate in the public hearing. 4, Council advised that at this stage it will not seek leave to be represented by a legal practitioner at the public hearing. And 5, the General Manager, in consultation with the Interim Administrator, be authorised to seek leave for the Interim Administrator and General Manager to be represented by a legal practitioner should it be considered necessary during the public inquiry. And I declare that carried. The next item is the 2020-21 annual financial statements. General Manager.
Through you, Mr. May, I'll ask the acting
CFO to introduce this item, and then once he's concluded, I'd like to make some further comments. Thank you.
Mr. CFO.
Mr. May, the draft general purpose financial statements have been presented on a consolidated basis in accordance with the Local Government Act, Australian Accounting Standards, and the Local Government Code of Accounting Practice and Financial Reporting. To the best of my knowledge, these draft statements present fairly the operating result and financial position for the year and are in accord with Council's accounting records. The draft financial statements will be audited by the Audit Office of New South Wales. In introducing the draft financial statements, I will briefly touch on the two main statements, being the income statement and the statement of financial position. And to close, I will discuss the key financial and asset management performance indicators and how Council compares to benchmark. The income statement summarises Council's financial performance for the year, listing all income and expenses.
Sorry, can I ask you to slow down?
Oh, sorry, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, the income statement summarises Council's financial performance for the year, listing all income and expenses can be found on page 20 of the agenda. The income statement shows a deficit of $707,000, which includes non-cash items such as depreciation and movements in provisions for expenses accrued but not yet paid. The income statement is also presented by fund on page 69 of the agenda. The General Fund reports a deficit of $4.3 million, and a deficit would provide some indication that Council's revenue is not enough to cover operating expenses in the short term. There are some contributing factors to the deficit in the General Fund, with some of the transactions considered to be one-off and not expected to be incurred in future reporting periods. Some of the main reasons for the deficit include a significant reduction in investment revenue of $688,000 on the previous year due to current economic conditions. Throughput at the Southern Regional Livestock Exchange was down by 11,500 head due to farmers holding stock for breeding, resulting in a drop of income of $446,000 on the previous year. The downturn is being experienced nationwide, with a national herd rebuild underway due to an abundance of feed being available, which is encouraging stock retention. Tulip time did not proceed in 2020 due to the public health order for public gatherings, and tulip time usually generates around $400,000 a year in revenue. Unplanned terminations and redundancies of senior staff were $893,000. Refunding of fees totalling $121,000 received at the Welcome Centre from an interim administrator minute on 9th of June 2021. These fees were not included in the fees and charges schedule, and Council was not eligible to charge them. This has been rectified for the current financial year and beyond. Depreciation expenses increased by $1.1 million on the previous year, primarily due to revaluations of transport network assets in 2019-20, which increased in value by $193 million. Each asset class is required to be revalued at least every 5 years in accordance with the accounting standards. Independent reviews and audits costing $115,000, and workers' compensation insurance premium increasing by $500,000 to $1.9 million due to claims history. The claims that have the most impact on the premium were made in 2018-19 and 2020 financial years, and the claims remain in the premium calculation for 3 years. The Statement of Financial Position provides a 30 June snapshot of Council's financial position, indicating its assets, liabilities and net worth, and is on page 22 of the agenda. Council's net asset position at 30 June 2021 is $1.9 billion. This is made up of a total assets of $1.95 billion, less total liabilities of $54.1 million. Council's overall cash and investments position has increased from $183.6 million to $192.4 million, which is an increase of $8.8 million. Much of Council's cash is restricted in its use to specific purposes by external bodies, legislation and Council resolutions, with the level of unrestricted cash remaining low at $89,000. The Finch report recommended that Council hold $5 million in unrestricted cash before setting aside funds to internal reserves. We are in the process of performing a comprehensive review of internal reserves and preparing a reserves policy on how reserves are created and utilised, which will be presented to Council in a future report. Receivables increased by $2.6 million. The main reasons for this increase are the rates and annual charges receivables have increased by $1.3 million, as Council did not conduct active debt recovery due to COVID. Council provided an interest-free loan to the Southern Highlands Hockey Club of $445,000 to be repaid over 10 years. The loan was a resolution of Council made in 2014. However, the loan agreement was not signed until October 2020, as the hockey club were pursuing and successful in grant funding to cover some of the costs of the project, which was $1.05 million. The loan was not included in Council's 2020-21 operational plan or budget. The report is being prepared for the November meeting of Council, which will review the loans provided to community groups and testing their compliance with the Local Government Act. The value of inventories was $1.16 million. This includes stock at the Mossvale and Mittagong depots for items such as vehicle replacement parts, emulsion, road materials, and water and sewer pipe. Council sold the remaining 4 lots in Anembo Street, Mossvale during the year, and these lots are no longer Council's assets. Infrastructure, property, plant and equipment is valued at $1.7 billion. Council capitalised $64.1 million in asset additions during the year, including $17.6 million in donated assets from subdivisions. Council revalued the open space and recreational assets and other structures asset classes at fair value at 30 June 2021. These revaluations were completed by an external valuer, with the increase in valuation being $9.7 million. Water and sewerage network assets are indexed at each reporting period, and the indexation increased the value of network assets by $4.7 million. Council's loan liability is $23.7 million. 2 loans were fully repaid during the year, and we also borrowed $6.31 million during the year. Council's employee leave entitlements provision has decreased by $486,000 to $9.1 million due to staff leaving Council during the year. We have $1.54 million in reserve to fund leave entitlements, which is equivalent to 17% of the total liability. We're also required to remediate the former landfill site at Welby, and the estimated cost of this is $3.588 million. So looking at the key performance indicators, so Council's financial performance is measured against several financial and asset management benchmarks. These indicators are intended to be indicative of the financial health and presence of good business management practices being conducted at Council. The indicators that I refer to and will discuss are the result of the general fund only and are on page 92 of the agenda. The operating performance ratio assesses Council's achievement in containing operating expenditure within operating revenue. The operating performance ratio is a negative 2.23%. A summary of contributing factors for the deficit in the general fund were mentioned earlier in this introduction, and taking those into consideration, I think this ratio will improve in future years. The own source revenue ratio measures fiscal flexibility. It is a degree of reliance on external funding sources, such as operating grants and contributions. Council continues to exceed this benchmark with 67.4% of revenue generated through rates, charges and user fees. The most focus for Council's cash or liquidity position is on the unrestricted current ratio. This ratio demonstrates the ability of Council to satisfy its financial obligations in the short term, excluding the assistance of externally restricted funds such as developer contributions and grant monies. A rule of thumb is that a strong unrestricted current ratio is 2 to 1. Council continues to maintain a strong liquidity position with a healthy unrestricted current ratio of 4.67 to 1. This means that Council can easily pay its financial obligations as they fall due. The debt service cover ratio measures the availability of operating cash to service debt, including interest, principal and lease payments. Council continues to exceed this benchmark which is a result of adequate operating revenues to cover its loan repayments. The rates, annual charges, interest and extra charges outstanding percentage assesses the impact of uncollected rates and annual charges on council's liquidity and the adequacy of recovery efforts. This ratio has increased to 7.87% due to outstanding rates and annual charges increasing because of COVID measures approved by council. Residents and businesses were able to defer rates payments without incurring interest. The final two ratios relate to asset management and can be found on page 111 of the agenda. The buildings and infrastructure renewals ratio assesses the rate at which these assets are being renewed relative to the rate at which they are depreciating. This is a longer term indicator and should be measured over several years, but the ratio for 2020-21 is 104.78%, which is a positive result. We are also reviewing depreciation methodology to ensure that we continue to appropriately fund asset renewals in a timely manner. The asset maintenance ratio compares actual versus required annual maintenance expenditure. A ratio above 100% indicates council is investing enough funds to prevent the infrastructure backlog increasing. Council's asset management ratio was 143%. So by way of conclusion, in assessing council's financial health, it's important to look at the indicators in totality. Now, whilst the general fund reported a deficit, council maintains a strong cash and liquidity position. Council is spending money on renewing and maintaining existing assets, utilising the special rating variation and meeting performance benchmarks. Council is not reliant on funding from external bodies to fund operations. Council's revenue is adequate to cover loan, principal and interest repayments. And in my opinion, council is in a sound financial position. This opinion was also highlighted in the Finch report. In closing, I would like to acknowledge the staff and in the finance and assets branches for their efforts in preparing the draft financial statements. It's been a challenging year and I'm grateful and proud of how the team rallied together and support each other to continue to achieve high quality work and results.
Thanks very much for that. John, as you said, you had some observations too. I've got a lot of questions, but you want to go first or? Right, the questions of the CFO. The $400,000, look, and thanks for your presentation. And can we include this presentation in the minutes so the community can see? I think it's very beneficial. The $400,000 in effect loss on tulip time last year, not this year. Will that be repeated again this year, do you think?
Well, we won't incur many expenses this year. It's only sort of a virtual experience. So we won't be incurring many expenses. So there shouldn't be a huge loss, no.
So that won't be replicated in this year's budget? End of year result?
It'll essentially be the same as 2020-21.
So another $400,000.
So there'll be no income, but there'll also be very limited expenses.
Yeah. No doubt there will be a debriefing on tulip time. I'm not suggesting that it be scrapped or anything like that. I think it's a fabulous opportunity, and the community, I'm sure, enjoyed it without the visitors and being able just to wander through. You mentioned in wages and salaries, in effect, that there was $893,000 paid as a result of exits, in effect, from the organisation. That relates to contractual obligations and payments, not to entitlements?
That's correct. That excludes any leave entitlements owed to employees.
What is the breakup pre and post administration?
So while council were in civic office, the amount was 241,000.
I'm sorry?
241,000. And whilst under interim administration was 652,000.
652. And how many people do those exits relate to?
So there was one while council was in office, and there was 5 people under interim administration.
Thank you. I just want these figures to be public because I think it's important that the community knows what the cost of restructuring an organisation is. And it may not be as high as what a lot of people are saying it is. The Southern Highlands Hockey Club loan, this is a new one for me. I don't understand if the council had an obligation from 2014, why it wasn't carried over into budgets from then on. Can you better explain that one to me, or is it going to be in the report that's coming about these loans?
I think that'll be covered in the report, Mr. May.
But it wasn't budgeted for.
That's correct. And I guess the reasons why it wasn't carried over, and I guess the delay between when council resolved to loan the money and when the actual loan was executed, that will also be included in the report.
The report's going to be interesting reading, I think. How many loans, or I'll wait for the report. The employees' leave entitlements, there would have been a major reduction in council's liabilities, wouldn't there, by the payments that have been made?
Yeah, that was about $486,000, the reduction from 1920 to 2021.
And is there a benchmark?
No, there's no benchmark, but we certainly have some, I guess, policies where we don't like to allow staff to accrue leave above certain thresholds.
Is that enforced?
Yeah.
Well, the question better for the general manager. I don't really notice you.
Possibly.
Okay, well, you can take that one on notice. Now, look, today I was watching a bit of the Central Coast public inquiry, and it really emphasised the importance of available cash. And I've said this before, I have a bit of a difficulty in understanding how our available cash position is really about $100,000 when it's not really, because it's all in loans, unrestricted reserves. So those unrestricted reserve, that report will be coming to the next meeting, or?
That'll come to the November meeting, council.
So because the council's liquidity is good when you take into account that money. But having said that, will you be able to achieve the Finch threshold of 5 million, do you think?
I think it might take 2 financial years to get there. I'm not certain we'll get there in one hit. We might have to increase it over time.
But the importance of networking funds, I hope isn't lost on the finance branch.
No, we still calculate networking funds, so we can provide that at the same time as the report.
Yeah, look, I'm intending to move an additional item in relation to this matter, as you know, the asset maintenance ratio, in my view, is not reflected in the condition of roads, and I want to try and address that, which I will later. But thank you, and thank your team for a good job in difficult circumstances. Is it you or the general manager who will advise in relation to what the independent audit committee had to say? You'll address that. Okay, general manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. So I'm just navigating the mask. I'd just like to make some observations on the budget that I've inherited, and I just want to also thank the acting CFO and the finance team and the assets team for their work in bringing together the end of financial year reports. As this acting CFO has stated, there are a number of reasons for the operating result this financial year, And some of that is COVID related and the impacts of COVID, either by way of waiving fees and or just the impact of a reduction in revenue, as well as some of the unforeseen expenses that have occurred, including, as the acting CFO has raised, the loan that was brought into the 2021 budget and will be the subject of a broader report to the November council meeting. As highlighted too, there is a need to review the funding of depreciation and looking at our assets. And with the new director on board, we'll be looking at the asset management plan, the condition assessments of our assets, and ensuring that we are funding depreciation to the level required for renewal and maintenance. I'm aware that there's been some discussion too around the level of staff turnover and internal vacancies. And whilst it's not unusual to have a higher level of turnover during a period of great change, I think it's important to highlight and put it in context that for the last few years, the percentage of turnover at Wingecarribee has ranged between 24 and 26% per annum, which is high and has an impact on the functioning of the organisation. To address this over the last few months, we are looking to actively manage employee leave entitlements, ELE, and the associated liabilities that go with that. We've prepared and commenced implementation of an attraction and retention plan. We've commenced a cultural change program, including having an agreed change management process endorsed through the Staff Consultative Committee. We've addressed some long-standing issues relating to internal communication. We've increased flexibility in work practices, in part driven by COVID, but also in part culturally within the organisation. And moving forward, we'll be more actively undertaking our workforce planning. We do have an ageing workforce. We do anticipate further retirements, and so we need to plan for those. And also in the future, we'll be looking to grow our own through partnerships with tertiary institutions such as TAFE and university. These changes have had an impact on DA assessment times. There has been also, compounding that, a significant increase in the number of DAs that council is receiving. In the order of around about 30% extra DAs have been received this year as compared to this time last year. So in terms of what we're doing to improve that and to improve our responsiveness and our turnaround times, we're currently implementing a customer request management system, and that system is currently rolling out and will be in place by December. We're bringing in additional contractors whilst we recruit for permanent roles. We're keen to ensure when we do recruit, we recruit quality applicants, and then we support them once they're in the organisation. We're also looking at new systems to improve pre-DA meetings to support applicants as they engage with council around their prospective applications and support that process, and improving our online presence. Council in the last 12 months or so has upgraded the website, and there'll be further work undertaken over the next few months to increase its capacity and capabilities. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thanks for that. What actually is the staff turnover or I suppose to the 30th of June will be the last one?
So through Mr. May, the current turnover rate's around 26%. For the last 2 financial years, it's been in the order of 24, 25%.
That's extraordinarily high, isn't it?
It is, Mr. May.
And the customer management system that's being introduced, that won't be give the customer a number and they never hear from you again.
The way in which it works is that it enables, and having seen...
You can take it. It's a bit hard. I'll put mine on then.
Sorry, the benefit of the customer request management system and having seen the benefits in other councils is it enables the tracking of customer requests coming in. It enables a central point. At the moment, we're receiving phone calls, emails, information through customer service. So it's coming in via a range of channels, which makes it very difficult to track. And so what it means through the system is having one point of contact. Yes, people are given a number, but we also then are able to track when people have called, if we've responded, and part of the implementation requires people to include notes. So where they have attempted to call back, or if they have called back, what the conversation was. And it also enables us then to track and improve what we do as we move forward.
And the directors and yourself would get lists of outstanding matters?
Yes, Mr. May. So the other benefit of the CRM system, customer request management system, is it provides us as the management team, the leadership team, with very good data. Apart from looking at responsiveness, it also gives a sense of the type of inquiries that we are receiving, so we can start to proactively manage those and look at if there are particular clusters of issues, what can we proactively do to address those.
Okay, thank you. Look, I would think in relation to DAs, Windsor-Carrickby Shire Council is not alone in the number of DAs coming into all councils, and I'm very conscious of the difficulties that the planning section here has had, and we're going through a rebuilding stage, and I think, it's just a reality of what's going on, but I think residents can be assured that the staff's doing their best. Look, the end of year results aren't too bad at the end of the day, having regard to the COVID and other issues. And many councils across the state will be in deficit. There's no worries about that. The General Manager said she would address what the Independent Audit Committee had to say, and said, I'll just ask you, because I'm very interested.
Apologies, I did mean to cover that. So at the council recently established a new Audit Risk Improvement Advisory Committee with 4 independent representatives on that committee that have accounting expertise as well as broad expertise in the areas of audit risk and improvement. At the recent committee meeting, the acting CFO provided a presentation on the end of financial year result, had a number of detailed questions, delving into the numbers, into the result. And at the conclusion of the ARIC meeting, one of the members stated that, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that all things considered and the turmoil of the organisation, it was a good result.
Thanks very much for that. Are your notes also going to be built into the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I think it's important so the community can reflect on it. Minutes should not be Hansard, but the community should be able to read them and understand, rather than looking at a set of accounts which really, unless you're a local government finance expert, they're very difficult to follow. When adopting, I think it was when I was adopting the council's budget for this year, I did say that when the elections were going to be held in September, if I was a candidate for election and I got elected, I would be asking for a report on Fit for the Future and the council's special rate variations, just seeing what was going on. During my administration, I intend to try and address as many issues as I can. So when the council laws come back, and that will be a matter for the Commissioner and the Minister, but when they come back, they can hit the ground running. I think that's important. I just don't want to leave this place without having tried to make a difference and to make it easier for the incoming elected body. Hence, I'm going to move the officer's recommendation 1, 2, 3 and 4 and add a number 5 that a desktop comparison review be undertaken by an independent consultant or consultants selected by the General Manager in consultation with the Chair, Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee to reconcile Roman numeral 1, Council's submission to the State Government in response to its Fit for the Future program, Roman numeral 2, the special rate variation application to IPART and any approval undertakings. 3, Council's 2020-21 financial statements. And 4, Council's forward financial plan. 7, such review to address expenditure and validation to ensure assets are carried at their true value. And 7, the report be considered by the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee prior to referral to Council. And I would declare that carried. I really, to be quite frank, don't agree or don't think that the valuations of assets are correct here. But there'll be many councils in the same boat. But you've only got to drive the roads. And the council, you know, the current council can't be blamed for the potholes. It's, a lot of that's an accident of history. They just put tar on top of dirt. But I think the community should expect better, particularly having regard to the special rate variation. And I just look forward to an independent look. I'm not saying I'm right or I'm wrong. I would just like to have a look at that so that the incoming council, even though it looks like I'll be doing the budget for next year, I would hope this won't take too long. And I know it's going to cost more money, but I think these reviews have to happen. Next item is on page 124, Lacey Park. Lecky Park. That being introduced, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. I'm just going to take my mask off.
Yeah, you can put the speaker a bit closer.
Put your mask on. Okay, just in relation to Lecky Park Regional Sporting Hub. So the project as envisaged included the expansion of the indoor sports hub and the development of the adjoining existing oval to include a high level of amenity at the oval. And as at August last year, the proposal included a 1,000-seat stadium and gymnastics area. In the past 4 months, we've adopted the housing strategy and have also undertaken more detailed demographic and population work, which will be finalised in the next week or so. I've also had the opportunity to review the overall strategic planning framework and resourcing strategies, including an initial look at the long-term financial plan and the asset management plan, and how the strategic planning framework and these resourcing strategies integrate. It's become clear that we need to undertake further work more broadly in relation to the community and recreation facilities planning and associated hierarchy, that is regional, district and local facilities. Taking into account the club's request for a modest amount of approximately 26,000 to progress the plans for their component of the project. It was on this basis that the report was framed, and it was on the basis that it was a relatively modest amount that would assist the association to move forward, that we would, subject to the outcome of the public exhibition period, able to accommodate that within a budget review process, and that the process that was proposed in this report also ensured that council complied with the requirements under section 356 of the Local Government Act. However, since advising the association via the Director Asset and Sponsorship of the report on council's business paper, they have revised their request for this grant or financial assistance to approximately $100,000. Via a letter that was received on Sunday evening, I've drawn this request to the interim administrator's attention. This amount is in addition to the previous funds council has provided to the association via the former loans program, which, as mentioned previously, will be the subject of a more detailed report to the November council meeting. Thank you, Mr. May. If there are any detailed questions in relation to the project, I can refer those to the project manager.
So the project manager's online, or?
Sorry, Mr. May,
Well, look,
Malcolm.
I don't really have many questions. I'm interested in the fact that the memorandum of understanding was signed in March of this year. When did the council resolve to enter into the agreement?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that was in August, in August 2020. Mr. Ryan may wish to add to that.
Thank you, Mr. May. Let me check the details in the report. I'm sorry, I was on the sewage treatment plant report.
Well, look, it's okay, Mr. Ryan. I'm going to defer this matter at any rate, because I don't understand if, well, I suppose if we knew in August last year, it wouldn't be in last year's budget, but that money should be in this year's budget, and it's not. I'm a bit confused by this one. I thought that they wanted the 25,000, but now they've written and said no, they want 100. In effect, that's the short answer.
Through you, Mr. May, the original project involved council partnering with the Basketball Association. However, given the changes with the housing strategy and also looking at our overall planning, we need to just press pause on the project as outlined in the report until we undertake that broader strategic work. But in the interim, rather than holding up the Basketball Association, it was to assist them to progress, and that was the original recommendation, to provide the $25,610 based on a letter that they provided to council indicating that that would be sufficient in order for them to progress their element of the project. I should add too that the broader project, as I mentioned, the broader project wasn't necessarily considered within the resourcing strategies of council and looking at the implications on council's long-term financial plan. So the report is recommending that we pause the project until we undertake that broader strategic work, looking at what our needs are for facilities and the location of those. And then, subject to the outcome of that, before any project proceeds that comes out of that strategic work, we do a detailed business case looking at the impact not only on the capital that's needed to deliver the project, but then the operational costs associated with that, any new facility, and what that means in terms of council's long-term financial plan and asset management plan.
So is there any strategic plans in the council that identify Lecky Park as the best spot for such a facility?
There was a strategy that was done in 2006. However, I don't believe that an overall Shire-wide facilities plan has been prepared that identifies regional, district and local. However, the landscape has also changed in terms of our housing strategy, and now we have a clear development plan for our Shire, and also we'll have much clearer demographic information that will also assist in that process.
Look, I was very happy with this recommendation because it allowed the Basketball Association to get on with what they wanted. but they seem to have now complicated it by saying they now want $100,000. And personally, I'm not convinced that Lackey Park is the best spot for a regional sporting hub. I think we need to ask the community. And where does a regional sporting hub sit in the wish list against a regional aquatic facility? For instance, where, you know, I'm told that schools cram into Bowral now that Mittagong's closed, and no one's happy. And I think we just need to take a deep breath. And I totally agree with you, General Manager, about this. But it's been complicated by the Basketball Association saying, in effect, now they don't want this money. I think they still want to look at the bigger wish. I could be wrong, but look, I'm going to move that one, the further letter of 10 October to the General Manager from the Moss Vale District Basketball Association be noted, and the matter be deferred for a further report and on-site inspection. And 2, such report to include full details of loans, grants or subsidies given by Council to the Association over the past 5 years, and copies of the Association's audited financial reports for the 1920 and 2021 financial years. And I'll declare that carried. Sorry, next one, 9.3, Bowral Sewerage Treatment Upgrade, page 130.
Thank you, Mr. May. Mr. Ryan will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. Administrator, this report seeks to exhibit the review of environmental factors that's just been completed for the upgrade of the Bowral Sewage Treatment Plant. This is a major upgrade in a difficult environment, and it would be wise, I think, for the public to understand exactly what's been taken into consideration in the review of the environmental impact before embarking upon the detailed design and construction of the plant.
Thank you. And I think this is a fabulous report. It really lays out the constraints that the council has in dealing with sewage. And, you know, we've had the water report and now we've got this one. You know, people flush the toilet and, you know, don't understand what goes on. And they don't realise that a lot of it ends up in the Sydney drinking catchment. And this, I think this is a fantastic report. So I am happy to move it. I move the officer's recommendation be adopted and a further update report be presented to Council on the Mittagong and Moss Vale Sewerage Treatment Plant upgrades. And a second item, an information session be held in relation to the Bowral Sewerage Treatment Upgrade project for the community. And I will declare that carried. You know, this is good work that the council's doing, and I just don't think there is enough good news stories, and I think this is an opportunity. The next one is 9.4, the Domestic Waste Management Reserve Review. This one being introduced. Well, this is another good news story. This is another good news story, this report. It was originally indicated that while there would be a free collection early next year in the current financial year, that in 22-23 financial year, there would be a cost to it built into the garbage service charge. And Mr. Finch's report shows that that will not be necessary. That it will be included again for free under the existing payment regime, and that still leaves enough money for the council to manage the additional costs that are going to be associated with the disposal of garbage to regional facilities. CFO, I've got that right?
That's correct, Mr. May.
It's a good news story, isn't it?
It is. Great outcome for the community.
Yeah. Okay. In relation to item 9.4 on page 141 of the business paper, I'd move the officer's recommendation and declare that carried. Um, 9.5 Old South Road water main budget adjustment. Not being introduced.
I can deal with it, Mr. May, if you wish.
Your call.
I just draw your attention to the fact that we revealed through the tender process for this work that there was insufficient details about thrust restraint, which is essentially concrete blocks to hold the pipe in place as it changes direction. And it has revealed that we need an additional $215,000 to cover the costs of these thrust constraints, and therefore need a small allocation from the water fund to fund this work.
Thanks. Is this the works currently taking place kind of in our Old South Road north of the Botanic Gardens?
Continuation.
Good on you. Thank you very much for that. In relation to item 9.5 on page 147 of the business paper, I'd move the officer's recommendation and declare that carried. 9.6 investment report. Unless one of the officers has something to say, I would move the recommendation outlined on page 150 of the business paper and declare that carried. (9.7) on page 156.
Mr. Mayor, probably another good news story in this situation that we have received very competitive tenders to carry out the design for the Moss Vale Bypass Stage 1. It is under budget, and recommendation is for Council to accept a tender from MU Group Proprietary Limited.
And I'm not going to move it into the recommendation, but can someone make sure that they advise the member for Goulburn, who is a very big supporter of this project, that we're moving at last on it. But I appreciate it's been a complex matter, so I'm not at all critical about this. I want to emphasise that. So on page 156, item 9.7, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Page 162, Canyon, sale of unformed road off Canyon Lee Road, Canyon Lee. Unless someone wants to say something about this, I would move the officer's recommendation in relation to item 9.8 outlined on page 162 of the business papers, 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. Next one is page 167. The post-exhibition report for the unmade road off Barrier Road, Goodman's Ford. Reading this report, this is a bread and butter thing, but I think it's certainly helping the residents there. I'd move item 9.9 on page 167 of the business paper, items 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and declare that carried. Uh, 9.10 on page 179. This is the matter that Ms. Fisk addressed. Do we have an officer? Or
Through Mr. May, we do. The coordinator property, Ms. McCulloch. Thanks, Mandy.
Thank you. Thanks, General Manager. Mr. May, on 9 June 2021, Council resolved to place the proposed road closure of Park Conjeewoy Street, Robertson on public exhibition. The closure of the road is proposed to create legal title for the Robertson Rural Fire Station, which is constructed within the road reserve. This will enable the RFS to make application to construct a retaining wall and also formalise car parking on site. The area of closure has been determined to allow for future expansion if required. However, there are no current plans to change access to the site. All properties adjoining the section of proposed road closure front Alcorn Lane and are rated as Alcorn Lane and not Conjeewoy Street. During the period of public exhibition, submissions were received. The matter is now reported back to Council for decision.
Do you know the area?
Yes, I do.
I thought you might. Will people still be able to get access through this area close to the railway line or not?
There's no proposal to change the access at this time. It's my understanding, although I, as a resident of Robertson, just my understanding is that Alcorn, most residents would use Alcorn Lane, not Conjeewoy, because Conjeewoy is actually it's unformed and in parts, and it's also a little bit steep, and there's private properties have some of their gardens and things on there. So in my experience, most people use, as I said, that's just speaking as a resident, the Alcorn Lane is used.
As I said earlier, I don't know with your hearing, it's a long time since I've done a road application, but it's my understanding that the adjoining properties have got to be offered the opportunity to purchase a portion. Is that still the case?
So in the Roads Act, no, that's not the case. In the Roads Act, council can close the road if they determine that it's not required for road, and that we can dispose it vesting council once it's closed, and that council, if they wish to, can dispose of the road and the proceeds come to council. Now, council does have a adopted road closure policy which states that the only applicants can be an adjoining landowner or council. So normally, in most cases, the applicant is the adjoining landowner, but in this case, it's council because we want to create a title for the Robertson RFS shed, which is actually built in the road reserve. So our adopted road closure policy allows for council to be the applicant and for the land to vest in council and as operational.
Did you hear the presentation of?
I didn't, I'm sorry.
Ms. Fisk?
No, I didn't, I'm sorry.
If this matter was deferred for a meeting, is it going to upset anybody?
No, it's really just an administration matter to get the title, because at the moment, because there's no legal title, because it's on a road reserve, the RFS wanted to apply to build construct a retaining wall, but because there's no title, they can't actually lodge the development application. So if it's deferred for a month, that's fine.
Look, I think Ms. Fisk has a general principle of not being happy with the sale of unmade roads because they're open space, and I think that's probably a worthy view. But on this occasion, I support the officer's recommendation, but so I can better understand and look for opportunities potentially, because the way I read the map, you might be in goats country, but you can still access along there. I think I'll defer this matter for on-site meeting with Ms. Fisk. And
I'd just like to confirm there is no intention to sell this section. As I said, it's the site of the RFS, so that's certainly not going to be the case.
Oh, look, I understand that, and I know the RFS is not going to move either.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think, for consultation and residents being heard, did Ms. Fisk make a submission to the council on this?
She did, yes.
She did. Okay. Look, I would move that this matter be deferred for on-site inspection and further report to the November meeting and declare that carried. Ms. Fisk, who is still in the gallery, I make it very clear I don't want to build any expectations. I actually agree with the officer's recommendation, but you've taken the time to come here, so I'll take the time to go there again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. (9.11) on page 188, Broughton Road, Moss Vale. There's no one to introduce this matter. Accordingly, item 9.11, Broughton Road, Moss Vale, transfer of Crown Road to council. I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 188 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. 9.12 on page 192. Is this matter no introduction? I just like to 9.12 investment advisor services appointment post quotation process. I agree with the recommendation, but I'd just like to ask the acting CFO of if he's aware of any other councils that Laminear Capital are servicing in the same way.
Yeah, they are, Mr. May. So they also provide investment advisory services to Central Coast Council, City of Newcastle, and Wollongong City Council, just to name a few.
Thank you. And the staff were supportive, as I recall, of Mr. Finch's recommendation in relation to this.
That's correct. That was one of the 11 recommendations that Mr. Finch made in his initial review into council's finances, and we fully support that recommendation.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.12, investment advisor services, I would move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 on page 192 of the business paper and declare that carried. Item 9.13, Old South Road, Bowral, Redford Farm, classification of land for detention basin. I assume there's nobody going to introduce this one. Thank you. In relation to item 9.13, the retention basin in Old South Road, I'd move the officer's recommendation on page 197 of the business paper, items 1 and 2, and declare it carried. Item 9.14, Ferndale Road, Bundanoon, acquisition for easement for sewer raising main. I would not being introduced. I would move the officer's recommendation in relation to item 9.14 on page 202 of the business paper, items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and declare it carried. 9.15, the Mittagong early childhood rooms, item 9.15 on page 211 of the business paper, not being introduced. I would move the recommendation in relation to item 9.15 outlined on page 211 of the business papers, item 1, 2, and 3, and declare that carried. Item 9.16, new waste contract on page 215 of the business paper. In effect, it's an update of the progress of works for the regional disposal, not being introduced. I would move in relation to item 9.16, new waste contract, the officer's recommendation on page 215 of the business papers 1 and 2, and declare that carried. 9.17, tender for the sewer pumping station upgrade. There's more than one. I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 217 of the business paper, 1, 2 and 3, and declare that carried. And General Manager, can I suggest that we do a press release on all this good work that's going on that people just don't see? And the council hasn't ground to a halt. Item 10.1, the council and staff interaction policy post exhibition. No one. I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 223 of the business paper and declare that carried. Next one is the register of returns for the interim administrator and other designated persons. Outlined on page 243 of the business paper. General Manager. Good point, yeah. Big business paper, wasn't it? In relation to, how could I miss this one? The joint organisation and other strategic networks, as outlined, starting on page 236 of the business paper. Is this one being introduced? I've got some questions on this one. Why, and look, you mightn't be able to answer this because I haven't asked, but it just intrigues me. Why in 2015 did council resolve to terminate its membership of the Southern Councils Group? Does anyone know?
My understanding of the situation is that's when the pilot for the Illawarra JO commenced, and Wingecarribee wasn't included in the boundaries for that pilot.
Was the council working with the joint organisation before then?
I can't comment on that.
Because this report infers that whilst we're in the Canberra region, we haven't taken the opportunities that has presented.
I note in that report that in staff view that there are opportunities that have been missed, working groups that haven't been participated in. There was a workforce management plan that all the other JO councils participated in. Wingecarribee didn't participate in that.
Look, if I could just say, look, I initiated this because I questioned whether council should be in the Canberra region joint organisation. When I look at opportunities you could be missing if you were in the Macarthur, I think it is. I see that the local member has made some big announcements in relation to Wallandilly yesterday. Having said that, I've attended 2 meetings of the Canberra Regional Joint Organisation, and I think it's a very professional organisation. So in no way am I criticising that. I'm just asking questions, and it may be that the council could have a watching brief on that, but I agree with the recommendation that we should await the Office of Local Government. But I do think that the Office of Local Government should be advised that we're looking at that as well. But my other question is, and this could be something to reinforce my view that this council was taking decisions other than the council meetings of the corporate body. It says in 2018, a councillor briefing was conducted by the ISJO to seek council's membership as an associate member. It is understood that council declined this offer. Do I take that to mean that there was no corporate decision, just a decision taken by a group of councillors at a briefing?
I wasn't in that briefing, so I can't comment for sure. I have done a search of council minutes to see if there was any report around that, and I can't find a report.
Thanks. In relation to item 10.2, the joint organisation and other strategic networks, I would move the officer's recommendation on page 236 of the business papers 1 and 2 and declare register of returns disclosing interest of the interim administrator and designated persons on page 243 of the business paper. General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. I now table those disclosures and they will also be published on Council's website.
Thank you for that. In relation to, because the minutes note that they were tabled, in relation to item 10.3, I move the officer's recommendation on page 243 of the business paper and declare that carried. Next item is 10.4, post bushfire flora research and recovery, acceptance of grant funding. I presume that's not being introduced. I would move in relation to item 10.4, the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 as outlined on page 247 of the business paper and declare that carried. Item 10.5, rate picking and contribution system review. Item 10.5 on the business paper. Is that being introduced? No. Well, look, that's a pity because I think it's a very, very meaty and good report. And I think the staff should be congratulated. It really lays out, in effect, the opportunities that could be lost, and I say could be lost, to this community if the proposal of the government doesn't get up, which is a contrary view to metropolitan councils who have the voices in this, but regional councils like Wingecarribee could suffer. Can I add a number 3 to this? That the report be brought to the attention of the members for Wallandilly and Goulburn. So with that addition, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 and then number 3 and declare that carried. And again, you know, rather than just jumping on the bandwagon, it's very well thought through. 10.6, Sutherland Park Drive, Barradoo. This being introduced by Mr. Park.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. May. So this report relates to a planning proposal to rezone land at Sutherland Park Drive in Barradoo to facilitate what is primarily a residential subdivision in accordance with the recently adopted local housing strategy. So the land subject to the planning proposal forms part of what is known as the Barrel South New Living Area that was identified as a future residential area to help meet the long-term housing needs of the community. And Mr. May, Council are committed to implementing the local housing strategy, and the Barrel South New Living Area is a really important component of our long-term housing supply. But the strategy also commits Council to better strategic and infrastructure planning prior to rezoning any of our new living areas, to ensure that new development areas are well planned and are well designed and are supported by essential infrastructure. So specifically, the strategy commits Council to a number of really key planning processes, so including the development of a site-specific master plan, an infrastructure and servicing strategy, and the finalisation of the Wingecarribee River flood study. And these bodies of work will ultimately determine how this area will develop over time, what the infrastructure requirements are, and how the infrastructure will be funded. So while the report provides in principle support for a rezoning on the subject land, importantly, it reinforces council's commitment to these really important strategic planning processes before a planning proposal progresses to the next stage in the gateway process. So the matter was considered at the local planning panel meeting of the 6th of October. And while the panel supported the staff recommendation, they did include an additional recommendation, which is provided as part of the panel's advice in the report.
That advice is the 2 lines before the recommendation?
Sorry, it's provided as number 7 in the report. Sorry, Mr. May.
But the panel, part of number 7 says, the panel identified reservations about supporting the present structure plan and formed their view, but there is nothing, there's no notes of the meeting, and I understand that council staff are not present when the panel makes determinations like this. Is that right?
Yes, so the panel go into deliberation and the staff leave the meeting at that point. I think the admin staff might possibly stay, but certainly the planning staff step out of the meeting so that the panel can deliberate in confidence.
Doesn't help me because, look, I fully endorse panels, there's no question about that. But where the panel says they identify reservations about supporting the present structure plan, and there is nothing in the minutes about those reservations, so this can't be seen as a reflection on the staff, because the professional staff are not there when these decisions are taken. So how are you supposed to know what the reservations are? And how is the community supposed to know? Look, I am totally committed to the residential strategy, and I'm amazed that I haven't had correspondence about this matter. It just goes to show that the community has confidence in the strategic planning of the council at the present time as well, I think. But I can't adopt this recommendation in the current circumstances. So I'm going to move that the matter be deferred to enable the panel's reservations to be clarified and opportunities for public/community benefit to be identified through associated contribution plans, and to ensure the public interest is protected. And I will declare that carried. And General Manager, can I suggest you might want to speak to the chair of the panel so that we have a better it's not so much me, it's the community has a better understanding of where the panel is on some of these matters. I don't think the panel are being critical of the officers either, but they have identified reservations which the community doesn't know. And, you know, if you weren't in the meeting, unless you speak to the chair of the panel or the council's professional officers, they won't know either. So if this matter could just go back to them for some clarity.
So, to you, Mr. May, I have a meeting with the chair of the panel next Tuesday, so I'll certainly raise that as a point.
That's great. The next item is 10.7 on page 273 of the business paper. Not being introduced. Okay, in relation to item 10.7 on page 273 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation, which in effect is the local planning panel's endorsed recommendation as well, and declare that carried. We now move to the late items on the business paper. 3 days notice was given of these late items in accordance with council's policy, but to be doubly sure that we're doing things properly, I would move the standing orders be suspended in order to consider the supplementary items and declare that carried. Having done that, I would move in accordance with clause 10.3b of the Code of Meeting Practice. The following matters be dealt with as a matter of urgency. Proposal to waive outdoor dining fees, materials on footpaths and environment, and health inspections as support for businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic, post-exhibition report. 2, out of hours care COVID-19 gap fee waiver. It's the outcome of the public exhibition. And number 3, openness and transparency progress update. And declare that carried. The first item is L1 on page 1. Is that being introduced?
No. Actually, sorry. Mr. Mayor, I might ask Ms. Reclamera to introduce that item, please.
Thank you, GM and Mr. May. Council and the community would remember that at the meeting in August, we considered a proposal to support the community through a number of mechanisms and to enable them to continue operating throughout COVID. Since that meeting, we have undertaken community consultation, which is outlined in the report, and are now recommending that we implement those proposals. Specifically, in regards to the deferral period for rates and charges for affected businesses, a full fee reduction for outdoor dining to support our local cafes and restaurants, and other minor measures to assist across the board.
Thanks for that. Look, and thank you for bringing this matter to council quickly, so there's some surety for businesses. I'm sure I speak on their behalf and I'm thanking you. In relation to item L1, I would move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 1 and declare that carried. Item number 2, out of school hours COVID gap waiver fee. General Manager?
No, Mr. Mayor.
I would move, and again, I thank the officers for getting this to council quickly. I would move the officer's recommendation in relation to item L.2 outlined on page 6 of the business paper and declare that carried. Item L.3, openness and transparency progress report on page 9 of the business paper. Pretty self-explanatory, but
through Mr. Mayor, again, I may ask, as one of your last addresses to council, Ms. Reclamera, if you'd like to just talk through the importance of this report, please.
Thank you. This was a really lovely report to be involved in, and I won't take credit for it. There are a number of authors across council, and I thank them for their contributions to the report. But it was nice to be able to report back to council and the community some of the changes that we've made in the organisation to promote openness and transparency and to embed that moving forward. So as council would be aware, there have been changes previously to the Code of Meeting Practice to facilitate more open and accessible briefing sessions and standing committee meetings, and we've put those into practice already. Additionally, we have limited the number of items being dealt with in closed council and ensuring that only items where we, as far as possible, are dealt with in open council, and only going into closed council where absolutely necessary. Further, we have put a number of reports up on our council website and made them accessible to the community in multiple ways. And this includes both new incoming reports such as the independent reviews, but also reports undertaken previously, which we've now made available to the community. And are also actively managing internally to ensure that we benefit from the recommendations in those reports. There are a number of other items that we've undertaken, and although they may seem minor in nature, they offer great benefits to the community. One of those, as an example, is the new search function on the council meetings and agenda and minutes page on the website, which offers a really easy way to search through all council resolutions to find ones that are relevant and to highlight those to the community. Further, we've also upgraded the website to include a public inquiry page where we're proactively releasing all information released to the inquiry, and we will continue to build that into the future. Further, there have been a number of community meetings and the implementation of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee that the General Manager briefed us on earlier, and also the rollout of the customer request management system and some changes to other IT systems to further enable openness and transparency moving forward.
Thanks for that, and thanks to your team for implementing so many of these things to demystify. In relation to item L.3, openness and transparency, I would move the officer's recommendation on page 9 of the business paper and declare that carried. I would now move that standing orders be resumed and declare that carried. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. If I may say something just before we conclude the meeting.
Yeah,
yep. Thank you. Just following on from your minute at the beginning of the meeting, I just wish to express my appreciation for the work of Marissa and Malcolm over the last few months. We've achieved a lot together, and I've appreciated their professionalism, positive approach, and the support to myself as General Manager, and also to their respective teams, their managers and the broader team. In a short period of time, we have achieved a lot, and we've got a long way to go. And I'd also like to welcome Carmel, Jeff and Karen, and very excited about the future, and we know we have the challenge ahead of us, but we have a strong and experienced executive to take us forward. So I welcome you and look forward to working with you over the next few years. So thank you, Mr. May.
I thought you were going to give the community an update on the front doors being opened.
Oh, and that too. So as we emerge out of a few months of lockdown, some longer than others, we are looking forward to opening our customer service next week from Monday, and we'll be gradually opening up all of our services. It was also good to see the pool open last weekend, and it was humming, I believe, on the Saturday, humming.
Okay, well, there's no more business. I thank the residents for coming today. The numbers are dropping off, and declare the meeting closed. Thanks very much.